It's Beat State Week. The Iowa Hawkeyes are taking on the Iowa State Cyclones this Saturday in Kinnick. This is Incompetent Sports Talk. Welcome to Incompetent Sports Talk along with Mike Rabin and Jake Burgers. I'm Alex Salzman. The Iowa Hawkeyes are 1-0. They had a 37-7 dominating win over Eastern Illinois. It's the 10th straight season opener. The Iowa Hawkeyes have won. Mike, what did you think of the Iowa Hawkeyes win?
I think all in all it was a solid performance in all categories, particularly special teams. I thought that was impressive. Packy O'Meara blocking the punt, running it back in for 42 yards. Adam Robinson clearly taking the carries, really making things happen, breaking tackles, running for 109 yards and 3 touchdowns. A lot of great things to talk about, but I'm really happy with the performance on Saturday.
Jake?
I'm very pleased too. Last year we really struggled against Northern Iowa, a team that we should have easily beaten. It was nice to get up 21-0 against Eastern Illinois. I know they had a lot of players missing for the game, but it was a solid performance for us. Ricky Stanzi was very economical with his decision making. It was a little scary watching him get hurt, but he bounced right back. Vandenberg did well in his short appearance. So overall, I was very pleased with the game.
Me too, 37-7. Hard to complain about that. This weekend we take on Iowa State. We'll talk about that later. And it was a pretty interesting weekend in college football. A lot of different storylines surfacing around throughout the country. So the next question I'm going to ask both of you is, what was the most interesting thread or news story that happened, in your opinion, over the weekend? Jake, it doesn't have to necessarily be the most important, but the one that you thought was the most interesting.
Well, I hate to rip on a team, but I have to do that this week with Kansas. They lost to North Dakota State 6-3. They managed to put up just 3 points on the scoreboard. What has happened to Kansas? A few years ago, they were in line to win the national, or participate in the national championship at least, till they lost late in the season to Missouri. But last year they started off 5-0. They were ranked 15th in the country. They ended up losing their last 7. They start this year with a new head coach, Turner Gill, who I like. I think he's going to do some good things at Kansas, but not a very impressive start, only putting 3 points against a Division I AA team, or whatever we're supposed to call them now. Just very disappointing. They've lost 8 in a row overall now. Next week I think they play Georgia Tech. It's going to be 9 losses in a row, and I don't know when it will stop if they can't put up more than 3 points against North Dakota State.
Yeah, and my story is kind of piggybacking on that. 2 Division I BCS conference teams lost to FCS conference teams, or FCS division teams, over the weekend. Kansas, that was one of them. Kansas only had, North Dakota State only had 169 yards of offense. They only had 2 third-down conversions. They had 109 penalty yards, and they somehow managed to get a win on the road. This is the 4th time in the last 5 years that they have beaten an FBS football team. So I don't know if a whole lot of those teams are going to come calling to give them a big paycheck to come and lose to them anymore. I don't think that's going to happen a lot. And then also, probably the more entertaining of the games, Ole Miss lost to Jacksonville State in double overtime. Ole Miss, a 9-4 team that won the Cotton Bowl last year, lost to Jacksonville State. They were up 31-10 at halftime. Ole Miss somehow blows that lead, and then in overtime, they somehow still let Jacksonville State score, and then in double overtime, Jacksonville State converts a 4th down, and then they go for 2 to get the win. You gotta love it. It was a thrilling football game, but man, with Masoli and Houston Nutt, they still found a way to lose that game. They play at Tulane this weekend. I just have a feeling that they're going to go whoop up on poor Bob Toledo in Tulane, just a feeling I have. But to me, that was the most interesting storyline over the weekend. Mike, what do you think?
Well, just brief responses to you guys. North Dakota State did beat Minnesota in 2007, 27-21 in the beautiful HHH Metrodome. So NDSU knows how to compete in some of these games. I'm not surprised that they were able to beat Kansas, Jacksonville State. What an unbelievable win for that program. Kansas, their last win was against Iowa State last season to get to 5-0, and they haven't won since. We'll obviously see the Cyclones here this weekend. I'm pretty excited. But my thread to talk about is the Big East Football Conference and their lack of a performance this past weekend. UConn going into the Big House, getting dominated by Denard Robinson and the Michigan Wolverines. I'll admit it, I was here last week talking about how UConn was going to go in there and get the win, how they were going to win the Big East. They got a lot of things to work on. Michigan may be a lot better than everybody thought they were going to be, and UConn can rebound, and I think they will and still win a lot of games. But that was disappointing. I thought Randy Edsall and UConn would put on a better performance. Fresno State beating Cincinnati 28-14. Another surprise there. Pittsburgh, number 15 in the country, going out to Utah, losing 27-24 in overtime on a field goal. Dion Lewis held to 75 yards, and then Louisville losing a big heated rivalry game to Kentucky. So the Big East not performing well. Obviously, Syracuse came out with a win. West Virginia came out with a win, and so did Rutgers. South Florida was also able to win their game as well against Stony Brook. But the conference didn't start out well, and you just have to start to question this conference. I mean, I still think they deserve a BCS, automatic BCS bid, but it is just a terrible conference at this point after week 1.
Yeah, and even going on how they ended last year, Cincinnati just getting absolutely thrashed by Florida in the Sugar Bowl, not boding too well for that conference. And also something that happened over the weekend, Reggie Bush, it's reporting now, Yahoo Sports reporting that he's going to get his Heisman stripped away. Do you guys think that that's fair, or do you think that they should still let him hold on to it, Jake?
I think it is fair. In the rules for winning the Heisman, you have to actually be eligible to play. And according to the NCAA rules, Reggie Bush was not eligible to play. He broke the rules. He should suffer the consequences. But if I'm Reggie Bush, I don't feel that bad about losing the Heisman. I feel bad about the current USC players who now cannot go to a bowl game and what he did to that program.
Yeah, I mean, I concur with that statement. I have no differences there. USC returned. When someone wins the Heisman committee gives out 2 Heisman trophies, one to the university and the other to a player. And so the USC already returned that Heisman trophy, and now Reggie Bush will have his stripped away from him. I think it's a good call by the Heisman committee. And like we've talked about before the show, it'll be interesting to see whether or not Vince Young gets offered a complimentary Heisman trophy, if you will.
Which apparently he said he doesn't want it, but yet if they mail him one, maybe he'll still place it on the mantle or something. I don't know. Also, another interesting story that happened over the weekend. I know we're kind of talking a lot about what happened last weekend, but on Labor Day, Boise State had a huge win over a top 10 Virginia Tech team. And so now a lot of people are talking if Boise State were to run the table and go undefeated, which would include a win over Oregon State, should they go to the national title? And under every circumstance imaginable, I would say no. First of all, you play in the WAC. The WAC is the second worst conference in college football. Congratulations, Western Athletic Conference. You're better than the Sun Belt. I think from top to bottom, a conference like the MAC is even better than the WAC. Boise State now has to play Oregon State. Oregon State's a good football team, but they don't win in September. They've lost 13 of their last 14, I believe, September games. That includes a loss last week to TCU. That is not really that great of a win. And then basically after they play Oregon State, they don't play anybody of significance the entire year. They got maybe a tricky trip to Reno to play Nevada, but when your conference consists of teams like San Jose State, Louisiana Tech, Utah State, Idaho playing in the mighty Kibbe Dome, that is not a good schedule. And if Boise State really wants to be legitimate, they need to do one of 2 things. One, move into a good conference. And I know they were going to move to the Mountain West, but you got to go to a conference like the Pac-10 if you want to be taken seriously. Look what Utah did. Or do what BYU's doing, go independent, and then schedule really tough teams like BYU playing Texas, and they're also probably going to add more teams to that schedule. I think they got to do things like that if they want to be taken seriously, because waking up for 1 game a year and then playing, basically sleepwalking through your conference schedule, that isn't the way to get respect in my book. I know I went on a long little rant there. Mike, what do you think about